Well, hey guys, so today's video is one of those garden videos where I'm just gonna take you around and I'm gonna show you what's going on. So a few weeks ago I posted a video where I put in some new flower beds out here by my front entry because, why did I do that? Because I want screening, because I want just something more pretty to look at from my side, but also from the roadside when you enter my house. So today I extended it just slightly because guess what? When I do garden design, I don't always do everything exactly like I want. I could draw it all up inside. I'm more someone that likes to see what I do. So what I did was I just came out recently and I extended it, probably about another, I want to say it's roughly 6 feet at least out, because what I did was recently bought a couple trees and I'm really excited. I'm going to put them in out here. So I have a Skyland spruce and now I have a couple, they're really fun ones. They're Lindsay Skyward and they're a cypress, so they're a bald cypress. They'll lose their leaves or their needles here in the winter, and then in the spring they'll get out these beautiful, they're gonna look so fun, and they're gonna really add some nice screening and some nice structure. You can see and hear that I'm by a highway, a 2-lane highway, so I like to have a little bit more of that, and I brought along the gator, so I have my fertilizers with me so we can get going. So what I thought we would do is hand the camera off so you can actually watch me as I'm doing it. I can explain some things about planting trees, because we all, if we could, should be planting trees, because it just helps not only Mother Nature, it helps our air, it helps us. It just is a good thing to do. So let's get started on planting some trees because I'm excited. I set these trees here a while ago, and what I really did, honestly, was, I'm a visual person. So when it says, you want to always look at the mature size something's going to get. You know, I'm using these for screening, like I said, and it's easy to want to visually, when they're small, put them close together, thinking, oh, I want them to fill in quickly. But the thing is, down the road, when a tree fully matures, you don't want it to die out on one side because it is too close to something else. You really want to look at the sizing of all your different trees. So what I do sometimes is get a tape measure and I put out and say, okay, how big does this tree get? What will be the overall size? You know, so on and so forth. And then you can lay it down. I'm just roughly showing you this just to explain what I do. And then you can see, okay, if everything grows as full and as big as it could, will it touch? Will it be too close? Because I want things to slightly touch, but not crowd each other or die out. So that's how I kind of came about and I started placing things, which every tree or shrub is going to be different. Like I said, these are Lindsay Skywards. And what I like about them is they're at a dormant stage. So we're really early in the year, but I found these at the local nursery and I was excited because I love buying things in dormancy, because guess what? Getting them home, there's no leaves or needles I have to worry about getting windburned or stressed out on the way home, because it is quite a drive for me to get home with them. And also, anything transplants, plants, goes into the ground easier if it's dormant, because it's less stress on it. So this tree is not actively growing and pushing out its growth yet, which means it's a great time to put it in the ground. So what I'm going to do is take this and just start digging a hole. That's the best thing. This isn't a tree bag, as you can tell. Whatever your tree is in is kind of no problem. You just have to work with whatever you have, but I'm gonna start digging, getting a pretty good sized hole, and then Kip might help me, we'll see. He sometimes does, but often he just likes to watch. He's a good supervisor. Not that there's a right way and a wrong way to dig a hole, but I am gonna say I have a method when I dig a hole. So obviously you have to move the tree out of the way, but I go around the perimeter first, and then I work into the middle. I just think it's easier to get out those big sections of the perimeter, lay them over to the side, and then dig out the middle if you need to. So honestly, I think sometimes we're apt to dig too deep a hole. What I'm doing here is wanting to make sure this is going to sit high enough that it doesn't cover the root flare. So that's what we're going to talk about next. I'm going to clean up a little bit and then we'll start getting planting. So when my hole is dug, I always start with biotone, because the thing is, when you're planting like a new tree, the importance isn't to fertilize the tree where it wants to focus on all of its growth above. You really want it to focus on its root growth. So that means putting a good root, fertilizer, stimulator, and that's what this biotone starter always does for me. So I'll put that into all my holes, just kind of work that in. It's a great way to make sure the roots are going to be healthy, active, and really want to branch out. So like I said, this is in a tree bag. Don't be scared whatever your tree is coming in, whether it's a bag, whether it's a nursery pot, if you get a bulb and burlap, or even a bare root. But the important thing here is I need to open up the bag. And now this tree is big enough, it's about a 15-gallon, I think, that I can't just pull it out of the bag easily. But also what's more important here is we want to find the root flare. So a lot of times growers, nurseries, when they repot trees up into a larger size, they just put lots of loose dirt on top and they sit up here a lot higher than they need. So what I first want to do is make sure I see where the root flare is, and that's where the trunk branches out laterally into the roots. So you want to follow it down, and you can see how loose this dirt is. So you can see they really just placed it on top, but look down here. This is a good, 4 inches at least, where right here is where the flare is, where it starts wanting to go out. So all of this needs to be exposed when I get it down into my hole. So I'm gonna set this sideways, let a lot of that dirt come off. Don't be scared of that. This a lot of times is just a growing medium that has a lot higher ratio of bark in it. And when I can't get a tree out of a bag like this easily because it's heavy, I'm just gonna cut it. I keep a knife around just for this reason. This is a knife, it's called a freezer knife. It's from the 50s and 60s. You can find them usually at like secondhand stores, and I love them. So what I'm doing now is exposing, and you can see when I'm taking, look at taking all that dirt away, there is that beautiful root flare. So you can see all these little flares that are going out into the soil like this. And that is what I want to make sure is exposed in there. So you can see it's a lot smaller root ball than you thought when it was in the bag. That's the important part here. And you can tell they probably just repotted this up really recently because that flare is really exposed, which is perfect. So I'm setting it beside here, and I'm gonna place it in my hole, and look at that. That flare now is gonna be perfect when I backfill, and I actually want just a little bit of soil under there. I honestly think we probably kill more trees from planting them too deep than we do from anything else. So look at that, that's beautiful. Now I'm gonna backfill with my native soil because, well, I happen to be blessed with good soil. But if you feel like your soil is really heavy, really lacking in something, I usually would amend it up to 50%. You still want your native soil in there because that tree, that shrub, that perennial, whatever it is, needs to get used to your native soil because that's what it's gonna have to grow in. So amend it up to 50% with a good organic compost, add some of that, and then backfill. But you can see here what I'm doing when I'm backfilling. Look, that root flare still exposed. Don't be scared of that root flare. I think that is the most important thing to take away when you're planting anything, especially trees. That root flare is super important. And if you have little roots like this and you think, well, they all need to be underground, this is just a little capillary root. So I'm just gonna pull that off. It's right at the top. That's no big deal at all. So I'm going to make sure I have all my soil around there. I'm gonna tamp it in slightly. I don't wanna stomp. I'm just gonna tamp it. And then once I get my other one planted, we're gonna water these well to make sure we got any air bubbles too. But that's a looker. I know right now it's not, but I promise you here, in about a month, when it starts flushing out growth, it'll be a looker. This is the second tree, and once I have them planted, and I backfilled with that loose bark it was kind of planted in, because I just wanted to put that kind of more as a mulch. But you can see what I'm doing is I'm really watering it in. So for most trees, I'm gonna give them at least anywhere from 2 to 5 gallon, depending what size tree they are. And you can kind of see I roughly try to make a moat around it, just lightly with my hand since it's loose soil. And what this helps do is as you're watering it, see how the water stays where you want it and it really soaks into the roots. I don't want it just to run off and go down into other parts of the bed. I want to actually stay on the tree. So that's why I make just a slight moat, nothing too deep. And then every time I water it here for quite a while, it's gonna be able to stay right around that area and be good. Now, obviously this tree and the tree over here, I did the same thing too, but I will be top dressing all of this with a good hardwood mulch, which will help suppress any weeds, retain moisture. But I don't wanna do that till I plant in some perennials later on. So I'm gonna pack up the gator and we're gonna go fertilize some hydrangeas because guess what? This is the time. This is the time of year. You may or may not remember that last year I did a video and I planted, I think it's 18 limelight hydrangeas. Now, limelight hydrangeas get really large. They get 8, 10 foot plus tall, round. They love to get big and they love to have full sun and have room to grow. So I planted them way out here, kind of at the end of my property that goes into the field that my family farms. And I wanted them just to get as big as they could. I want almost like a hedge, and I want just tons to be able to cut, not only to look at for beauty. So that's why they're out here, kind of in the middle of nowhere. So last year I took the sod out, and I did it with a sod cutter actually, and then I put down hardwood mulch. Here it is. And so now that they've been in a year, I really want to get them going well, and I want to make sure they're going to be happy. I haven't even taken off, you can see the flower heads yet, which I don't really want to trim them back because I want them still to have some good sturdy growth on them. With a limelight hydrangea, it's really good the first few years just to let them grow because you want them to have sturdy branching to support those big, heavy blooms so they stay upright. So before I really start knocking it back or trimming on it or really cutting it down, I want to let it just grow. But I do want to fertilize it. And so this year I'm going to start fertilizing them, and I'm going to fertilize them with hollytone. So hollytone works well because guess what? Hydrangeas are acidic loving plants, and hollytone is for acidic loving plants like holly, like hydrangeas. So I'm going to use hollytone on all of them. So what it's going to do is just help support, give them more blooms, give them what they need to really grow that vigorous, beautiful green growth with the big blooms. So I'm going to open the bag and I'm going to start putting this on. I'm going to be honest, I used to not necessarily be a huge fertilizing, I didn't do a lot of it because I felt like I didn't have the time. But the thing is, when you start doing it, you really notice the difference. So that's why I do it now. So usually with fertilizer, you want to put it in about the drip line of a plant. So the drip line is kind of the width of the plant straight down and make a circle around it. That's the drip line. That's where its roots are really going to soak in the fertilizer. So it's honestly pretty easy. You can look at what size plant you have and accordingly give it what it needs, but then you just sprinkle it around. And no, you do not let your pets eat it. Kip is always very interested in the smell, but he knows that he cannot eat it. And sometimes what we have to do is put him up on the gator to make sure he doesn't, but I don't allow him to eat it, do I, buddy? No. So I'm going to continue, and I'm going to just put some around the whole plant. And then what I make sure to do is once I get it around the perimeter of the plant, which you can see there it is, I get a small rake and I make sure to rake it in somewhat because you don't just want it to sit on top and get a crust. Instead, I want to rake it in. So let's grab the rake, Kip. So I just use a small rake. You can see it's a smaller one so I can get in underneath the plant. And I just work it in, even though it's just even worked into the mulch here on top. Once it starts raining and once it really starts getting the moisture, it will work down into the soil. You don't have to dig down and put it in. As long as you work it in and it stays right around the plant like this, it's gonna work down where it needs to go and just be a nice slow release all season. So I'm gonna do the next 17 and then they're gonna be happy. Okay, so you can see there's always something to do. Now, we planted trees today. That was fun. And we fertilized the hydrangeas, which look at this row of hydrangeas. I'm gonna admit, I've kind of been thinking all winter since I planted these last year about the blooms that could be coming, and I'm getting a little excited. So that's why fertilizing to me just felt kind of like something I really wanted to make sure I started doing. So every year, hopefully I get bigger, better blooms, bigger, better plants. That's the whole point. And someday, look at that whole row. Yeah, that's gonna be a good row. So I'm gonna go fertilize some more hydrangeas, different things I have, because guess what? There's always something to do. Till next time, what do I hope you do? I hope you like this video, but I also hope you share it, because not only does it help me, it helps everyone see that, guess what? Gardening is easy, but it can also be fun. It can all be applicable to just one tree planting or one hydrangea shrub, maybe. Whatever it is, whatever works for you, I hope this helps something. So, can't wait to catch you again.